I was born Edith Ruth Ann Devlin on July 4th, 1869, in Woodbridge, Canada. My earliest memories all relate to this small, white, English-style church. I was so small, I had to stand on the kneeling benches in order to see over the pews. But when I did that, I sang those hymns with all my heart. And when the minister said to us, "God will not allow you to depend on anything but Him," I understood him perfectly. When I was just 4 years old, my father died. That pushed our family into very serious financial troubles. My mother's parents were wealthy and they could easily have helped us, but they did very little, and even that grudgingly. I was so small, but my mother confided in me completely. She told me about the unkindness of her parents, about the fickleness and hypocrisy of worldly life, all her heartaches, all her sorrows. At a very young age, I witnessed many tears and learned early to deal with suffering. I resolved that I would base my life on eternal realities. I believe my steady progress toward the Master began right then. As I grew into adolescence and womanhood, my independent nature increased. No one could force anything on me. But if I saw something that I believed in and I wanted, I went after it fearlessly. I had an insatiable desire for truth, and I read constantly and was reflecting always on the great thoughts of the world's great thinkers, especially religious philosophers and saints. I don't remember having a single thought that didn't have behind it the thought of God. I hungered to know more about God and how to bring Him close in my life. My mother said to me, "If you don't marry, you're going to be lonely in your old age." I answered her, "I will never marry except for love." My heart longed for true love, but I was utterly unimpressed by the members of the opposite sex. Whenever any young man asked me out, the answer was always the same: no. A friend of my brother's said to him, "It's going to be a brave man who marries your sister." But then I met Mr. Bizet. Mr. Bizet won the hearts of all who met him, including mine. I was 30 years old when we got married, and Mr. Bizet was still in law school when our only child, Clark Prescott Bizet Jr., was born. But we always called him Rex because he was the king of the household. Later on, we moved to Seattle, and when my husband found his true calling as a teacher, he became the dean of the law school at the University of Washington. From my study of the wisdom of India, I knew in order to reach my divine goal, I would have to have a guru to discipline and guide me. I resolved that until I found such a one, I would make life itself my guru. I would take every experience with the disciple's attitude and understand every circumstance as a lesson from my guru. But still, I longed for that kind of training that would allow me to make rapid spiritual progress. When my longing became very intense, Master came to Seattle. When I heard that Swami Yogananda would be giving classes, I decided not to go myself. I was concerned, you see, that my interest in this long-haired Hindu would create unfavorable comment and place Mr. Bazette in a difficult position at the university. So I asked Rex to go, thinking he could learn and he could teach me. Rex actually became Master's first student in Seattle. And when he came home, he was so enthusiastic about what he had learned, but he had taken a vow not to reveal the techniques to anyone. Later, he explained the dilemma to Master and received permission to teach me. Oh, never to be forgotten day. July 12th, 1925. The answer to all my prayers. The culmination of all my longing. The day I met Master. As soon as we saw each other, there passed between us the recognition of Guru and disciple from the past. Rex had invited Master and a few other guests to have dinner at our house. As we all sat around the table, the guests were intrigued by a novelty salt shaker we had. It was weighted at the bottom, and when you pushed it over, it always came up again. Each of the guests in turn tried to lay it down, but always it came up. When it was Master's turn, he stared at it intently for a few moments, then pushed it over. It came up. He pushed it over again. It came up. And again. Then he laid it down and it stayed down. The guests were amazed. Master said simply, "The mind was determined that it would stay down." But later, he said to me, "I heard the voice of God say, 'For the benefit of sister, lay it down.'" And then he added, "I knew then that you would be drawn to this path." After dinner, I took Master to see my meditation room. Silently, he looked at the pictures of the holy men there. Then turning his back to the long row of windows, softly, he prayed for me and gave me the blessing of being able to hear the Om for the first time. For as long as we lived in that house, on the very spot where Master stood, I always kept a vase of orange flowers. The next night, we again had guests for dinner, and Rex told them about the curious incident with the Swami and the salt shaker, so each of these guests too tried to lay it down. Always it came up. When it was my turn, I pushed it down and it stayed down. When the guests expressed their astonishment, "She can do it too," I knew in my heart it was not I who had done it. It was Master's vibrations through me. From the moment of our first meeting, I have lived in his vibrations. Those were years of almost ceaseless travel for Master. And after that first meeting, I didn't see him again for nearly 5 years. But we wrote often, and I thought of him constantly. During those years, I had a heart attack and many other serious illnesses. when things became very bad, I wrote to Master and asked him for his prayers. I was sitting on my meditation chair at the time I thought he would be receiving the letter. Suddenly the chair began to shake. I thought it was a heavy truck driving by on the cobblestone street outside. But when I looked, there was no truck. Then waves, thunderous waves of Om swept over and under the house. Master's vibrations healed me. Years later, I wrote to him, "For 16 years I have followed you from point to point, so that I no longer feel your absence. For wherever you are, there am I also, standing silently, invisibly before you, humbly waiting for the moment when you will offer to me a word or a smile." In 1932, after Mr. Bazette died, I moved to Mount Washington. In my 60s, I became a monastic. And shortly after, Master initiated me into the Venerable Swami order, giving me the name Gyanamata, which he said meant Mother of Wisdom through Devotion. But from our first meeting, Master always called me sister, and so I was known to all. I wrote to him, "God alone has become my motto, and a sign with those words hangs above my bed as a reminder of my vow never for a moment to forget my divine goal, and never to allow anything to come between you and me. And I never have. You have been the pole star of my life." Whenever Master would come into a room, I would approach him silently, touch his feet, and then depart. Naturally, someone asked me, "Why do you always leave the room when Master comes in?" I said, "Because I don't want to give him the slightest reason to feel he must pay any attention to me. I don't want him to feel he must utter to me even a single word." You see, I was very fortunate from the start in this one respect. My understanding of the guru-disciple relationship. I did not mistake it for a friendly one or a social one, nor is it for work, nor for service, or for pleasure. It is solely spiritual, so deeply spiritual that it passes away beyond my sight or understanding. In the later years, illness kept me confined to my room almost all the time. Once, when I knew Master would be leaving that day, I sent a message through Kamala asking him to pause on his way out and look up at my window where I would be watching for him. That day, as he was driving out, he stopped the car. And for a long time, we gazed at one another. When he raised his hand in blessing, I thought my heart would burst for joy. Whenever Master sent me a blessing or a prayer or a healing, I always consciously received it. Sometimes even at a distance, I found I was attuned to his thoughts. One Sunday morning when I was in my room as usual and he was lecturing at one of our churches, I said to the nun who was taking care of me, "In his lecture, Master has just revealed what Divine Mother has said to him. Dance of life, dance of death. Know that these come from me and rejoice. What more dost thou want than that thou hast me?" Later that day, when Master came to visit, I told him how much I liked Divine Mother's words. He smiled at me and said, "Ah, so you heard, did you?" One Christmas I wrote Master a note, which I placed outside his door. For recognizing me as your disciple from the past. For taking me in when I had nowhere else to turn. For holding me to the path when, bewildered by an agony of pain, I knew not which turn to take. For everything that has come since. For all that you are that I know you to be. For all that you are that I can never know. I offer you reverence, gratitude, devotion, and love. But never enough. Oh, never enough. It could never be enough.
Good evening. It's a joy to be with you, fellow disciples of our Master. I think it's the greatest joy in this life, besides being with the Master himself. I understand that you would like me to speak about my life and how I came to meet our Master. Well, my life before I met Master was fairly ordinary. I'll slide over the details of how my early life before meeting Master fairly quickly, as I don't think it very important, except as it prepared me to serve Master in his work. My life was fairly ordinary, though some might consider it worthy of comment. I was born on May 5th of 1892. That sounds like a long time ago now, doesn't it? I was born in a farmhouse on a little farm outside of the little country town of Archibald, Louisiana. My father worked that farm. They rented the farm, and when I was born, their fourth child, they named me James Jesse. James Jesse Lynn. That's a respectable sounding name, don't you think? Well, they never used it. I was just Jimmy. Jimmy for a very long time. Considering my unremarkable beginnings, some have said that my life was remarkable. Little Jimmy pulling himself up by his bootstraps, precocious, spunky, taking fortuitous leaps, being offered positions of great responsibility at a young age, which he demonstrated that he could handle, and finding himself, scarcely 30 years old, at the head of very large business concerns in Kansas City. Railroads, insurance, petroleum. That's a long story with many chapters. And though you might consider such success exciting, as I certainly did at the time, it all pales in comparison now. In comparison with the true wealth, with the incomparable success that Master was able to give me since I met him in 1932. Under Paramhansaji, I began a new life, became a new person. I scarcely recognized myself anymore. And later, I got a new name, Rajarshi. Rajarshi Janakananda. I think you probably never thought you'd hear Sanskrit pronounced with a Louisiana accent. My life prior to meeting Master was business, business, and more business. I was under great strain, there's no doubt about that, managing many large concerns at the same time. To lighten things, to leaven the intensity of it all, I took up golf. The trouble was that I was in the habit of focusing intensely on whatever I did. I'd throw my whole mind, all my faculties, at whatever was before me, including golf. Well, I became tolerably good at that game, won a few tournaments, well, more than a few. But I failed miserably at one thing, relaxing. My nervous system was under such strain in those days that I would become irritated at the drop of a hat. If I were on the golf course and missed an important shot, I'd throw my club up in a tree and walk away. And so I bought an estate in the country where I hoped desperately that I could relax. Because the truth is, my soul was sick. My mind was overwrought. My body was heavy and often severely strained. I had presumed that money and business success would bring me a certain happiness, would provide me a settled well-being, a security. And I must admit that there was some of that. But underneath it, there was a hole inside. A kind of a hollow absence, which was sometimes dull, sometimes sharp. An emptiness where I thought by all rights that there should be a fullness. What was I to do? I was at my wit's end. And then it happened. I was driving to work one day. It was early January in 1932. I was going to the office in Kansas City, as I always did, when I saw a billboard up ahead. What a remarkable looking woman, I exclaimed to myself out loud in the car. I craned my neck and gawked up at the long flowing hair, the deep, remarkable eyes. It was probably 3 or 4 days later that I saw a newspaper announcement for a series of lectures being offered by a Swami Yogananda. Well, you know, back in those days, and especially in my part of the country, folks considered Hindus to be a bunch of snake charmers. And I don't think I was too different, but something drew me. I wanted to go and hear this man speak. My wife, Hilda, objected. Frida, I don't know how I forgot her name. I suppose I've tried so hard to forget about her. Why do you want to go and hear some heathen blabbering at you for? He'll probably stand you up and turn you into a monkey, make you look more foolish than you already are. Our home was hardly a haven of peace and rest. Frida did not mince words. Well, I did not go to the lecture that night. But when the time came for the second lecture, I was determined to go, whether Frida liked it or not. And when she saw that my mind was set, she decided to come along with me to protect me, she said. Well, do you know that we were both so impressed with this Swami Yogananda that we went to every single lecture. And when the lectures were over, we signed up for the class series. Listen to this. I had seen Master up on the stage perhaps 3 or 4 times when suddenly it struck me. This saint up there on the stage is the self-same woman that I saw up there on that billboard. Master got a big kick out of that when I told him about it a few months later. You know, it was hard for me to sit through those lectures and those classes. Now, it wasn't because I wasn't interested. Of course I was. I was fascinated. But you see, in those days, I had a hard time sitting still. My mind, my whole nervous system was so highly stressed and strained that I was perpetually restless. My hands twisted and fidgeted. My eyes twitched. But listen, sometime during the evening of the second class, I became aware that I was sitting up straight. My spine was upright, and I was motionless, absolutely motionless. I gazed down at my hands, and they were still too. And as I marveled at this remarkable quietude that had come over me, I glanced up at the stage. And there I saw Master, and nearly the entire stage as well, bathed in a luminous blue light. And in the midst of that light, I saw Master looking down at me with that intense, loving gaze of his. And he was smiling. And from that day forth, I have never been restless since. Almost never. Well, my snake charmer bias was quickly replaced with a great reverence for the saints of India as the embodiment of the greatest of all sciences, it seems to me, yoga, the science of soul exploration. Do you know that the very first time that I met Master, he was able to transmit to me the experience of samadhi, conscious union with God. He taught me how to practice Kriya Yoga, and I did a few breaths. This was the beginning of my yoga practice. Can you imagine? I was very fortunate, very blessed, I believe. All those many years of intense concentration on business, and I mean intense concentration, I was now able to focus upon Master's teachings and the techniques, so that I made fairly rapid progress. Master spoke about it in a class he gave some months later. He said that during that first meeting that I had touched the Christ consciousness. My soul was ripe, he told those people. And he spoke to them the words that he had heard me speak as I descended back into this more limited consciousness. Life boils in my spine. This is the technique that I have been seeking. I have found God. Right away, Master told me that even though I must continue my business responsibilities, that I must arrange my schedule to allow for a period of meditation every day. So I woke early, every morning, and I drove to the office in the dark, several hours ahead of the rest of the folks that would come later. I'd write a note and put it every morning on my secretary's desk. I am in conference. Do not disturb. Those people didn't know that I was need to know that I was in conference with God. After this transformative spiritual awakening, just as before, I maintained a full schedule of business responsibilities. And I maintained that schedule for 20 years. Oh, at first, I chafed in the harness. I strained a bit. The truth was, I felt trapped, surrounded by those people whose primary motivation was material gain. I wanted to be free. I wanted to be with Master I wanted a new life. When Swamiji left Kansas City, it was very difficult for me. I was distressed. But I wrote letters to him, and he wrote letters back. And that sustained me. I brought one of those early letters to read you, characteristic of my letters to him in those days. Only my love for Divine Mother is wanted. How distressed I am when pulled away from her and from communion with her loved ones. I cannot live of this world, and I would prefer not to live in it. I'm looking forward with deepest earnestness to my return to your side. Please, write often, even short notes, or just a word from you. From your heart, help to sustain me to a degree that I know it is hard for you to realize. Divine blessing, devotion, and boundless love. Your little boy, James. Master called me his little boy. He never called me Jimmy. That life and that name seems like a long time ago now. Though, in another way, it seems very close. You know, as we practice the teachings over time, we become childlike, do we not? Master called me his little boy. He would often say to me, I am in you, and you are in me. I didn't have the foggiest idea what he was talking about. At least at first. I suppose I had an inkling. The words were very poetic. But you know, over time, as we practice these teachings, Master changes us. And now, well, I feel Master with me always, inside and all around me. Day and night, waking and sleeping. I close my eyes and Master's there. I open my eyes again and He's still there. In all of you, in the trees, the sky, and the sea and beyond. I've completely forgotten where my story was going now. Business was not my only field of challenge. Frida had attended all the Master's lectures and studied teachings for some while. But the time came when she began to see that I was gaining so much spiritually that she felt that Master was pulling me away from her. And to my very great dismay, she turned away from Master altogether. It got to the point where she'd fly off at the handle at the very mention of his name. A few years before I met Master, I'd had another association with a Hindu teacher, a Dr. Gyani. And when my association with this man had become known in Kansas City, well, it had a very serious effect on my business dealings. And now, with Frida's change of mind and heart, I worried that if my association with Master became similarly known and publicized, that it might have disastrous effects upon my business concerns. This was very worrisome. I chewed on it hard for some while. I fretted about it for quite a long time. But finally, one day when I was sitting beside Master, I decided to put it to him. He was quiet for some while, and then he said, "Follow me silently. Do not mention my name." Well, I must admit that this did put my mind to some rest. But a happy solution it was not. How was I supposed to hide, to keep secret, that which had become the very foundation, the very core of who I was? How was I supposed to hide that which was my very mission, my very reason for being? It took me some while. But I came to hold my inner life secret in the same way that I held it sacred. And I shepherded that soul life as well as my God-given business responsibilities from all affront and harm, and went about my God-given work. Master said to me frequently over the years, "You are in business for God. Nothing must hinder the accomplishment of your mission on earth." My mission on earth. You know, disciples often hold me in high regard, but I did not write, I did not teach, I did not lecture except to speak briefly on occasion, but I did meditate with all my soul and all my sincerity, and I did follow the teachings and the techniques with all my concentration, and I tuned myself to the Master, thinking about him day and night. And I worked, and worked, and worked for God. All of that hard work was softened somewhat. Well, softened to a very great degree, actually, by being able to spend weeks at a time, even months, with Master in Encinitas, meditating. In order to spend as much time as possible with him in California, I at last put my nephew, Eugene, in charge of Frida, her care and concerns. My association with Master, that secret was kept so well that even Frida did not know of my $1 million gift to SRF until years later, in 1954, after Master's death, when the news leaked out. And it was greatly publicized. Oh, that stirred up quite a hornet's nest with the relatives and other parties who felt they were concerned. More like a tornado, really. We got through it. I'll never forget my nephew Eugene reporting to me, "Aunt Frida hit the roof. You are lucky you weren't there to hear her." I couldn't help but chuckle, seeing Eugene's tortured face as he described his aunt's antics and bitter tongue. I knew those tongue lashings all too well and remembered my years of suffering. I never went back to Kansas City after that. I suppose in part to spare myself those tongue lashings. Master said that I attracted such a wife in order to learn patience. God gives us the teachers we need. I supported Master's work the very best way that I could. The needs, the financial needs, were ongoing and substantial. Master was always tumbling with inspiration and ideas. He was always hatching new projects. And the resources needed for those projects were often greater than I could provide, at least in the short term. A fact that Master sometimes had a difficult time accepting. But slowly, surely, steadily, we built a solid foundation under our work. I remember in 1935, years before, when Master felt the call to go to India. Now, that was a very challenging journey in those days, very ambitious journey, several oceans and half a world away. But Master was feeling God's call and his Guru's call very strongly. So I provided first-class ocean passport to Master and his entourage. We put a Ford automobile on board the ship so that they could get around India and Europe more easily. It was on that trip that Master met many of the spiritual luminaries and saints that he wrote about in his autobiography. And while he was away, we were busy cooking up a wonderful surprise for him. And Master had always talked about and dreamed about a retreat looking out over the ocean. Well, we found the ideal property in the little seaside village of Encinitas and set right in, designing, then constructing, and then furnishing the buildings. we ran circles around ourselves, trying to get ready in time for Master's return. And you should have seen his face when he saw it. He was beaming, smiling from ear to ear. He couldn't stop smiling and couldn't stop exclaiming, which was music to our ears. We were just as happy as he was. Master and I meditated beside the ocean together, day and night. I didn't want to eat nor sleep. Never before had I experienced such unity, such divine friendship, such communion, utter bliss. You must forgive me for speaking so much about myself. It does feel odd. I don't think much about myself these days, and there are no desires left for myself. Though I do feel a very strong desire that you should understand what Master has done for me. And along those lines, I'm feeling the inward permission just now to tell you this story. It's a strange story, but a wonderful one. In August of 1952, 3 or 4 months after Master had passed away, it became clear that I was suffering from a brain tumor. And so on August 14th, an operation was performed to remove that tumor. And sometime during the operation, which was a delicate and dangerous one, my soul slipped out of this body. But Master slipped in. And he occupied this body from that day until 7 days thereafter. Durga Mata witnessed it when she came to my hospital room to visit me. She said my back was to her when she opened the door. And when I spoke in a voice that was very strong, not like my voice at all, but like Master's voice. Give me a Kleenex. The truth was, I had died on that operating table. But Master had stepped in at the crucial moment and then let me come back in when it was all right. Some months after Master's passing, but before the operation, he was able, even not being in the body, he was able to transmit to me a high state of samadhi. It came about in a strange way. I had been meditating for 4 days, and I saw no lights, had no visions, no sabbakalpa samadhi, not even any sense of grace, just a complete and total emptiness. No matter how hard I prayed or how hard I concentrated, utter emptiness. And then in the midst of that emptiness, on the 4th day, I saw a tiny speck of light at the spiritual eye. And I don't know whether I entered it or it engulfed me. But it grew and grew until it had assumed the dimensions of infinity. And since that day, that vision has never left me. I live my ordinary life, but it's more like a play projected on a screen before that great vision. The friendship that Master and I shared in this world was rare. Lovers of God, we swam in a sea of God. You should have seen us walking hand in hand, up and down the flagstone path there in Encinitas, walking out across the grass, looking out over the sea, our eyes alive with love, our souls shining like embers, glowing with the friendship that we had in God. Master wrote to me once in a poem, "You are forever free." He wrote to me a number of poems over the years. I brought my favorite one to share with you. My little one, you and I are one. Oh heavens, I don't need to read this poem. I've had it in my heart for such a long time. My little one, you and I are one in Mother Supreme, in her eternity's dream. And when this world melts in cosmic dust, and our bodies dissolve as they must, still our souls will shine in a blended starlit, forever, ever, expanding in the divine. Well, there's not much more to say. Good evening, and all of Master's blessings be yours.
My birth name is J. Donald Walters. I was in New York City at the age of 22, and after I finished reading the autobiography of a yogi by Paramhansa Yogananda, my first impulse was to jump onto the next bus headed to California and meet him. But not wanting to act impulsively, I decided I should wait. So I waited one whole day. Therefore, for the next 4 days and nights, my home was a succession of buses headed to California. I arrived in Los Angeles. I was exhausted from my journey. There I took the first opportunity to shave and to bathe. Then I continued on by bus 100 miles south to Encinitas, where, as I had read in his book, I learned that he had his hermitage. I approached the hermitage with bated breath, but I recalled from his book that Yogananda too had once gone to visit a saint without prior notice of his coming. That saint came out from his village to welcome him. So, would Yogananda too know that I am coming? And would he too come out and welcome me? No such luck.
May I help you?
Is Paramhansa Yogananda in?
Oh, you've come about the water.
At the time, I had an all-white suit on, and with my mispronunciation of this unfamiliar name, I must have given the impression of being a utility serviceman of some sort.
So you've come to check the water?
No! Is Paramhansa Yogananda in?
Who? Oh, yes. No, he's away for the weekend. Is there something I can do for you?
Well, yes. No. I mean, I want to see him.
He's lecturing at our Hollywood church.
Hollywood? You have a church there in Hollywood? It soon became apparent that I was not making the best of all possible impressions. I want to join his work. I want to come and live here at the ashram.
Have you studied the printed lessons?
Printed lessons? But I didn't know he had any lessons to be studied.
There's an entire course of them, and you would have to finish the whole course before you could possibly live here.
Well, how long would that take?
4 years.
4 years? Well, how might I get to this Hollywood church? Soon, I was on my way back to Los Angeles. On the way there, I alternated between bouts of heated indignation at this woman's presumption that I would not be able to come and live in the ashram, and desperate prayers for acceptance. This was the first time in my life I had wanted anything so desperately. I simply mustn't be refused. I simply couldn't be. At one point, I was thinking of my elderly hostess, and my mind was about to wax indignant once again, and suddenly I remembered her eyes. Oh, they had been very calm. And even, I reflected with some astonishment, wise. There certainly was much more to her than I had realized. Forgive me, I prayed, for misjudging her. It was wrong of me to think so unkindly of her. She was only doing her duty. But now, it seems she must certainly be a great soul. Forgive me. Arriving in Los Angeles on September 12th, 1948, I went to 4860 Sunset Boulevard. The Hollywood Church was located there. And there, I was greeted by a woman from behind a long table at the rear of the room. May I help you? Oh, yes, I'm here to see Paramhansa Yogananda. Oh, well, I am sorry, but his time is completely filled today. Well, when can I see him then? Well, let's just see. Oh, I am sorry. His appointments are completely full for the next 2.5 months. 2.5 months? But I've come all the way from New York just for this. Oh, I am sorry. How did you hear about him? Well, I read his autobiography just a few days ago. So recently. And you came just like that. People usually write first. Didn't you write? Well, no, I didn't even think about writing. Oh, I am sorry. But it will not be possible for you to see him for at least 2.5 months. But in the meantime, you can come here to the church and attend the services. And you can study his printed lessons. Oh, printed lessons. Yes. Oh, thank you. Morosely, I began to wonder about the church, my mind in turmoil. I was praying to Master desperately, you must take me. You must, you must. This means my whole life to me. You must take me. You must. Finally, it occurred to me, a novel thought, perhaps I simply wasn't ready yet. And for this reason, the doors had not been opening for me. If this were the case, then I would move to the hills near Hollywood, and I would come to the church and attend the services regularly, and I would study the printed lessons, and I would wait. The Master would know it when I was ready, and he would summon me. So with this resolution in my mind, and no small disappointment in my heart, I made for the door. No doubt, I needed this lesson in humility. Perhaps things had just always come too easily to me, or perhaps I was just too confident. At any rate, as soon as I accepted the fact that I might actually not be spiritually ready, the situation changed dramatically. I had just reached the door, and the woman who had spoken to me before called out, since you have come so far, I'll just ask Master if he will see you today. And then just a few moments later, she returned. Yes, Master will see you next. A short while later, I was shown into a small sitting room. Oh, what large, lustrous eyes greeted me now. What a compassionate smile. I had never seen such divine beauty in a human face. The Master seated himself in a chair and motioned me to a sofa beside him. What may I do for you? The third time today, these same gentle words. But this time, oh, how fraught with meaning. I want to be your disciple. The words just welled up irresistibly from my heart. I had never expected to say words such as these to another human being. The Master just smiled gently. And there ensued a long, long discussion interspersed with long silences, during which Master held his eyes half open, half closed, reading me as I well knew. Over and over again in my heart, I was praying, you must take me, you must take me, you must. You must take me, you must take me, you must. I know you know my thoughts, and I can't say it outwardly, I'd only weep. But you must accept me, you must. I agreed to see you only because Divine Mother told me to. It was not because you've come so far. I only do what God tells me to do. Then there were more discussions, some of them about my past. Master seemed pleased with my replies and with my truthfulness. At one point, he said that he already knew what I had just told him, indicating that he was just testing me to see if I would answer truthfully. What's a line? Again, a long silence. I was praying fervently. I am taking fewer people now. Oh my, was this remark intended to prepare me for a letdown? How did you like my book? Oh, sir, it was wonderful, wonderful. That's because it had my vibrations in it. Vibrations in a book. I had never thought of vibrations coming from a book. But clearly, I had found that his book was almost alive with its power to convey not merely ideas, but a new state of awareness. Incongruously, even absurdly, it then occurred to me that if I could demonstrate some practical use that I could be to him, that he might be more likely to accept me. Sir, I did find several split infinitives in your book. Oh no, a 22-year-old, literarily untried, but already a budding editor. I have never lived down this faux pas. But Master took it with a sudden and then amused smile. My motivation for that remark was certainly transparent to him. More silence, more prayers. All right. You have very good karma. You may join us. Oh, but sir, I can wait. I can wait. I had just hoped that he was not taking me because I had not found any other place to stay yet. No, you have very good karma. Otherwise, I would not accept you. I give you my unconditional love. Oh, immortal promise. I couldn't begin to fathom then the depths of meaning in those marvelous words. And will you give me your unconditional love? Oh, yes, yes, sir, yes. And will you give me your unconditional obedience? Oh. As desperate as was my desire to be accepted by him, I wanted to be utterly honest. Sir, suppose sometimes I think you're wrong. I will never ask you to do anything unless God tells me to ask you. When I met my master, Sri Yukteswar, he said to me, "Allow me to discipline you." "Why, sir?" I asked. "Because in the beginning of the spiritual path, one's will is guided by whims and fancies. Mine was too, until I met my master, Lahiri Mahashaya. Once I attuned my will to his wisdom-guided will, I was able to find true freedom. In the same way, if you attune your will to mine, you will find freedom. Only by doing God's will can you become completely free." I see, sir. I give you my unconditional obedience. When I met Sri Yukteswar, he gave me his unconditional love, just as I have given you mine. Then he asked me to love him in the same way, unconditionally. But I said to him, "Sir, what if I find you to be less than a Christ-like master? Could I love you in the same way?" Sri Yukteswar looked at me sternly. "I don't want your love. It stinks." "I understand, sir. I understand." Master had struck at the heart of my greatest weakness, intellectual doubt. "I give you my unconditional love. Come now, kneel before me." I did so. And right then, Master had me repeat after him, in the name of Jesus, God, and the others of our line of gurus, the vows of discipleship and of renunciation. Next, he took the forefinger of his right hand, placed it on my chest, over my heart. His arm vibrated almost violently for 2.5 minutes. Incredibly, my consciousness from that moment onwards, in some all-penetrating manner, was transformed. I left that interview room in a daze. It was unusual, to say the very least, for a disciple to be accepted so quickly. A few moments later, Master came out from behind the open curtain onto the lecture platform. And smiling, he called out, "We have a new brother."